What happens when one of comedy's most fearless truth-tellers sits down with a host who's forgotten what real comedy looks like? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had Ricky Gervais walking off Jimmy Kimmel's set, leaving, the audience stunned and the host scrambling to save face. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how ego and agenda can destroy what should have been television gold. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're going to want to discuss this one. The cameras rolled as Jimmy Kimmel flashed his trademark grin, but there was something different in his eyes tonight. Ricky Gervais sat across from him, relaxed in that uniquely British way, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "So Ricky," Jimmy began, his voice carrying an edge that regular viewers might have missed, "you've been pretty vocal about cancel culture lately. Some people are saying you're just trying to stay relevant by being controversial." Ricky raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Controversial? I'm just telling jokes, Jimmy. Same as I've always done. The world's gone mad if honesty is controversial. But don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with your platform?" Jimmy pressed, leaning forward. "I mean, when you make jokes about certain groups, people get hurt." "People get hurt by jokes," Ricky chuckled. "Then maybe they shouldn't." "Watch comedy. Look, Jimmy, comedy has always pushed boundaries. That's the point. If we're just telling people what they want to hear, we're not comedians. We're cheerleaders." The audience laughed, but Jimmy's smile tightened. This wasn't going according to his plan. He had clearly prepared talking points, probably encouraged by his network to take Gervais down a peg. "But surely you can see the difference between pushing boundaries and just being mean-spirited," Jimmy continued, his tone becoming more accusatory. "Some of your recent material, it feels like you're punching down rather than punching up." Ricky's expression shifted. The playful smirk was gone, replaced by something sharper. "Punching down. Jimmy, mate, I make fun of everyone equally. Rich, poor, famous, unknown. That's equality. What you're suggesting is that some people are off limits because they're somehow lesser. That's actually more offensive than anything I've ever said." "That's not what I'm saying at all," Jimmy shot back, but his voice cracked slightly. "I'm saying that when you have influence, you should use it responsibly." "Responsibly according to who? You? Your network? The Twitter mob?" Ricky's voice was rising now, his famous temper beginning to show. "I've been doing this for decades, Jimmy. I was making people laugh when you were still trying to figure out which camera to look at." "Don't lecture me about responsibility." The studio audience was getting uncomfortable. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they expected from a late-night talk show. Jimmy realized he was losing control of the situation. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "Look, Ricky, I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, you could consider how your words affect people. Is that really so unreasonable?" "What's unreasonable?" Ricky said, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Is you bringing me on your show under false pretenses, just so you can ambush me with some moral superiority lecture. Did your producers tell you to do this? Is this some kind of setup?" Jimmy's face flushed. "Nobody told me to do anything. I'm just asking legitimate questions." "Legitimate questions?" Ricky laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jimmy, you've made a career out of safe, sanitized comedy. You've never taken a real risk in your life. You read jokes off teleprompters written by a room full of writers who are too scared to offend anyone. And now you want to sit here and tell me how to do comedy." The silence in the studio was deafening. Jimmy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He had clearly expected Ricky to back down, to play nice for the cameras, but he had severely underestimated his guest. That's not fair," Jimmy stammered. "Fair." Ricky stood up now, his chair scraping against the floor. You want to talk about fair? What's not fair is inviting someone on your show and then trying to make them look bad to score points with whatever audience you're trying to impress. What's not fair is pretending to be a comedian while you're actually just a corporate mouthpiece in a suit. Jimmy's face went from red to pale in seconds. The audience was dead silent, some people actually covering their mouths in shock. This was live television at its most raw and uncomfortable. Ricky, please, let's just calm down and have a civil conversation, Jimmy said, trying to regain his composure. But his voice was shaking. Civil? You ambushed me on national television, and now you want civil. Ricky remained standing, towering over the host, who suddenly looked very small in his oversized chair. You know what, Jimmy? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you told a joke that actually meant something? When was the last time you said anything that wasn't focus grouped and approved by a committee? Jimmy tried to force a laugh. Come on, Ricky, you're being a bit dramatic, don't you think? Dramatic? I'm being honest. Something you clearly wouldn't recognize if it bit you on your perfectly groomed backside. Ricky gestured to the audience. Look at them, Jimmy. They came here to laugh, to be entertained, and instead you've turned this into some kind of twisted intervention. I was just trying to have a meaningful discussion about the state of comedy today, Jimmy protested, but even he didn't sound convinced by his own words. Meaningful discussion? Ricky laughed bitterly. You wouldn't know meaningful. If it wrote itself on your teleprompter, you know what your problem is, Jimmy. You've been playing it safe for so long. You've forgotten what comedy actually is. It's not about making people comfortable. It's not about confirming their beliefs. It's about challenging them, making them think, even if it makes them uncomfortable. Jimmy shifted in his seat, clearly out of his depth. But surely there's a way to be funny without being offensive. Offensive to who? And who gets to decide what's offensive? Ricky's voice was getting louder again. You, your network executives, some random person on social media who's never told a joke in their life? Comedy isn't a democracy, Jimmy. It's not about consensus. It's about truth, even when truth is ugly. The bandleader looked nervous, clearly wondering if he should start playing music to cut to commercial. The producers in the booth were probably having a meltdown. This was not going according to anyone's script. Look, all I'm saying is that words have consequences. Jimmy tried again, but he was clearly grasping at straws. Of course they do, Ricky exploded. That's the whole point. If words didn't have consequences, jokes wouldn't be funny. But you know what else has consequences? Cowardice, mediocrity, pretending to be something you're not just to keep your job safe. Jimmy's hands were visibly trembling now. I think you're being unfair. I've taken risks in my comedy. Risks? Ricky's laugh was sharp and cutting. Jimmy, making fun of Donald Trump's hair isn't taking a risk when your entire audience already hates him. That's not brave. That's pandering. Taking a risk would be telling a joke that might actually challenge your audience's beliefs, not just confirming them. I've criticized politicians from both sides, Jimmy said weakly. Have you? Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent the last few years being a cheerleader for one particular political viewpoint while pretending to be neutral. That's not comedy, Jimmy. That's propaganda with a laugh track. The audience was getting restless. Some people were actually starting to leave. This had gone way beyond uncomfortable and into something that felt almost cruel to watch. You know what really bothers me? Ricky continued, pacing now like a caged animal. It's that you brought me here tonight with an agenda. You didn't want to have a conversation about comedy. You wanted to take me down a peg, to make yourself look good. You wanted to be the hero who stood up to the big bad comedian who says mean things. Jimmy was sweating now, his carefully styled hair starting to lose its shape. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. But it did come across that way, didn't it? Because that's exactly what it was. You set this up, Jimmy. You planned this little ambush because you thought it would make good television. Well, congratulations, you got your good television. I hope it was worth it. I really think you're misinterpreting my intentions here, Jimmy stammered, his voice getting higher. I respect your work, I always have. I just wanted to explore the idea that maybe, in today's climate, we could find ways to be funny that don't hurt people. Hurt people. Ricky stopped pacing and stared directly at Jimmy. You want to know what hurts people? Mediocrity. Being talked down to. Being told they're too fragile to handle a joke. You're not protecting anyone, Jimmy. You're insulting them. You're saying they're too weak to handle comedy. Jimmy looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue him from this disaster. I don't think wanting to be considerate makes someone weak. Considerate? Ricky sat back down, leaning forward intensely. Jimmy, do you know what's not considerate? Inviting someone onto your show and then spending the entire time trying to make them look bad. Do you know what's not considerate? Pretending to be their friend while you're actually setting them up for an ambush. It wasn't an ambush, Jimmy protested, but his voice cracked on the words. Then what was it? Because it sure feels like one from where I'm sitting. You've been sitting there for the last 10 minutes, trying to paint me as some kind of villain, because I tell jokes that might make some people uncomfortable. But you know what makes me uncomfortable, Jimmy? Fake sincerity, manufactured outrage. The idea that comedy should be sanitized and approved by committee. Jimmy wiped sweat from his forehead with a tissue. I just think that with great platform comes great responsibility. There you go again with the superhero quotes. Ricky shook his head. This isn't a comic book, Jimmy. This is real life. And in real life, comedy has always been messy. It's always pushed boundaries. It's always made some people uncomfortable. That's not a bug. That's a feature. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Jimmy seemed to be weighing his options, probably realizing that every word out of his mouth was making things worse. Look, Ricky, Jimmy finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Can we just reset? And talk about your upcoming projects? Ricky stared at him for a long moment, and you could see the exact moment he made his decision. Reset. Ricky's voice was dangerously quiet. You think you can just reset after trying to destroy someone's reputation on live television? You think you can just move on to the weather and pretend this didn't happen? Jimmy's attempt at a smile looked more like a grimace. I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was just asking questions that I thought our viewers might be curious about. Your viewers? Ricky stood up again, this time moving closer to Jimmy's desk. Jimmy, your viewers tune in to escape from the real world, not to watch you play gotcha. Journalism with your guests. They want to laugh, not witness a character assassination disguised as an interview. The camera operators were clearly getting instructions through their earpieces, probably being told to keep rolling no matter what. This was television gold, even if it was a complete disaster. I think you're really overreacting here, Jimmy said, but his voice was getting smaller with each word. We're just having a conversation about comedy and culture. A conversation? Ricky laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. Jimmy, in a conversation, both people get to talk. In a conversation, there's mutual respect. What you've been doing is lecturing. You've been trying to school me on comedy, like you're some kind of authority on the subject. Jimmy's hands were fidgeting with his note cards now, clearly desperate for something to ground him. I've been doing late-night television for years. I think I know something about comedy. You know something about reading other people's jokes off a teleprompter, Ricky shot back. You know something about safe, sanitized entertainment that won't offend your advertisers. But comedy, real comedy, the kind that actually matters. You wouldn't recognize it if it walked up and slapped you in the face. The audience was completely silent now. Even the people who had been shuffling around earlier were frozen in place, watching this train wreck unfold in real time. You know, what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? Ricky continued, his voice filled with disappointment rather than anger now. You actually had talent once. I remember watching you years ago, before you got this job, before you became whatever this is. You used to take risks. You used to say things that mattered, but somewhere along the way, you decided that being safe was more important than being honest. Jimmy's eyes were starting to glisten. Whether from embarrassment, anger, or genuine emotion was impossible to tell. That's not fair. I still care about comedy. I still try to make people laugh. Do you? Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you care more about being liked than being funny. You care more about your image than your integrity. And tonight, you were willing to throw me under the bus to protect that image. I wasn't trying to throw you under anything, Jimmy protested weakly. Then what were you trying to do? Because it sure wasn't trying to have a friendly chat with a colleague. You came into this with an agenda, Jimmy. You wanted to take down the guy who says uncomfortable things so you could look like the reasonable one. The problem is, you forgot that I don't play by your rules. Jimmy looked around the studio desperately, as if hoping someone would jump in and save him. But his bandleader was staring at the floor, his announcer was nowhere to be seen, and his producers were probably too shocked to know what to do. Look, if I gave you the wrong impression about my intentions, I apologize, Jimmy said. But even his apology sounded hollow. Your intentions were crystal clear from the moment I sat down, Ricky replied. The question is, what are you going to do now? Are you going to keep pretending this was some kind of misunderstanding, or are you going to own up to what you actually did here tonight? Jimmy opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in probably years, he was completely speechless on his own show. That's what I thought, Ricky said, shaking his head. He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Jimmy one more time. You know, Jimmy, comedy is supposed to be about truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. But you've forgotten that. You've chosen comfort over truth, safety over honesty. And that's not comedy anymore. That's just entertainment for people who don't want to think. With that, Ricky walked off the set, leaving Jimmy sitting alone at his desk, staring after him with his mouth hanging open. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or just sit in. Stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Jimmy's humiliation as he struggled to figure out what to say next. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever, before Jimmy finally managed to croak out, "We'll be right back after these messages." His voice barely audible and completely devoid of his usual confidence. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen a late-night interview go this wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories that show what really happens when the cameras are rolling. What other celebrity interviews do you think have hidden tensions that never made it to air?